Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Outside the Box, the art show on Ahlul Bayt TV, where we look at the Islamic tradition from different perspectives and through art and writing, poetry, as well as other mediums. So today our guest is Ali Jaber Al Kathemi, and I'm going to be asking him about his poetry. He writes poetry in English related to Islam and also related to other subjects as well. So we're going to be exploring these different methods of writing poetry and also different styles as well. So before we continue with our discussion, let's just take a look.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Ali Jaber Al Kathemi and I'm a poet. For me, poetry is feelings on paper. That's what I call it. If you want to translate the Arabic translation of poetry, sha'r, masha'ar, feelings. So for me, it's the same thing. When you want to express your feelings, you write poetry. It's the best way to express your feelings because it just makes it more colourful. Well, I grew up listening to Arabic poems and the recitations, by different reciters, and I started memorizing poetry. And the more I memorized, the more I had a storage in my brain of words. And when you have that storage, you tend to want to use that storage and want to write and express your feelings by using the words that are stored in your brain. So the more you memorize, the better it is, and the more you want to write poetry and encourage yourself to write poetry. Writing poetry for Ahlul Bayt is a tradition, many years ago from Jabir al-Khuzai. And many poets in the history of poetry, I don't know, some poets found it difficult to write poetry for Ahlul Bayt. But the way you want to describe Ahlul Bayt, you can't just describe them, by writing an article. You have to make it more, as I said earlier, colourful, more with a bit more oomph. Do you understand? A bit more texture, something that the listener would want to hear more of. You have to make it look attractive. So for Ahlul Bayt in particular, you can't do anything but compliment them and describe how beautiful they are. And the best way to do it for me is poetry. My inspiration, first of all, is Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. He's my number one inspiration spiritually. But when we want to talk materialistically, I think physically as well, my father would be my inspiration because he, as I said, I grew up listening to his poetry, and I wanted to be like him, so he was my inspiration. But spiritually, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. When I write a poem, I don't think of the audience that much because I get into this position where there's me, there's the paper, there's my feelings, and there's Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. When I start thinking about my audience, it will distract me a lot. So if I know what topic I'm writing on, and if I know what my target is, if I know my intention and the clarity of my intention, then I wouldn't want to think too much about my audience. But sometimes when I do want to write a poem to express a particular issue to a different part of the world, if I wanted to write in Arabic, it's for Arabic audience. If I want to write in English, it's for the English audience. So yeah, sometimes I do think of who I want to send a message to, but I don't let it bother me too much.
So Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the studio.
Alaikum assalam.
Your father is also a poet, well-known poet. I wanted to ask you whether poetry runs in your family further back.
It does actually. It started off from my granddad. Actually, one of my favourite poems, Arabic poems, were from my granddad. And you've got my dad's older brother.
Right.
He writes poetry. My dad's younger brother writes poetry. And Yeah, so you could say it runs in the family.
And were you inspired by your father, or did the inspiration come from within you? Is it because all of the members of your family have that talent, that inspiration, so it just came naturally to you?
Well, I mean, everyone, like, no matter what they do, you know, a kid always looks up to his dad.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's poetry, whether it's sports, whether it's, you know, being a doctor or whatever it is. I grew up listening to my father's poetry and reading his poetry. So, you know, I always wanted to be like him.
Yeah.
You know, as a kid, I wanted to copy him. So yeah, I mean, you could look at him as an inspiration for me. But I mean, physical inspiration, yeah, my dad. But spiritual, I'd say Ahlul Bayt.
Yes. Yeah. Salam.
They're the main inspiration.
Alhamdulillah, yeah. And so when did you start to write poetry? If you saw your father from when you were small, did you start from when you were small, or was
from
it
when
later?
from when I was like I don't know, like 7,
Yeah.
6, actually probably younger than that, because I used to go to the mosques and I used to listen to his poetry there, and I used to memorize. I mean, he used to tell me that, you know, I used to have poems in my head and I kept reading them, you know. So from what I can remember, when I can speak, really. I mean,
Yeah.
if I know how to say Dad, I'd know how to say Ya Hussein
MashaAllah.
in a poetic manner, yeah.
Yeah, so it's part of just the atmosphere and the environment that you were growing up in as well. It was just came naturally, like.
Yeah, I mean,
that.
I wanted to be like him.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I'm listening to his poems day and night, and I enjoyed listening to them, you know,
Yeah.
I wanted to do what the reciters do.
Yeah.
When I used to see him sitting down, I remember when he used to get the paper, he used to fold it in half, and you know, he used to sit down and just write. I mean, the reason why he folds it in half, so he just has more space and it's more flexible. He can hold it rather than just opening. So he used to sit down, he fold it in half, and we used to write. And I used to do the same thing. I used to get a paper, fold it in half, and sit down and lean on my leg and write the poems. So that sight in particular wanted me, you know, encouraged me to do what he's doing as well.
Yeah.
And the way he's doing it as well.
Did he ever give you any critical feedback of your poems?
Well,
or?
I mean, to start off with, he didn't really want me to become a poet.
Right.
You know, he just, I mean, of course, every father would want success for their kids.
Yeah.
So he'd rather me focusing on my education and, you know, put all my energy on that and become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And not only that, he just felt like poetry needs a lot of emotion and energy to be released in a poem. So he didn't really want me to go through that. And maybe he's got his own reasons why he didn't want me to be a poet, but that's why I know.
Maybe he knew how hard it is and he didn't want to see you.
Yeah, he didn't want me to, I wouldn't say suffer, but he wouldn't want me to, you know, stress over the fact that, you know, I need to write poetry and my message needs to go out there, and I need to write a new topic every now and then, and make sure I'm not repetitive and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
To be inspiring. It's not easy to be inspiring on demand. Really.
No, it's not.
It's almost like a contradiction in terms, because inspiration is supposed to be spontaneous and come from the heart.
Absolutely.
But if you're asked to constantly be inspiring, it becomes...
It becomes quite challenging.
It's a task, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, poetry for me, it's not just I wouldn't label the word demand on it or anything like that, because for me poetry is that they come from within, you know. Poetry comes from within, and it's about how you feel about a particular issue.
And also I wanted to ask about again, because we've had a couple of poets on, I wanted to ask if you could tell me a bit more about the traditional role of the poet in Iraqi Islamic culture.
Well, the traditional role from many centuries back, from what I can remember, poets like Abu Ghafla, Abdul Hassan Abu Shaba, and even further back,
with poets like Jabir Al Kathemi, what they, I mean, the way they did it was they had a reciter,
Yeah.
you know. And even Al-Mutanabbi, who's one of the most famous Arabic, most successful